Have you ever avoided dealing with pain from your past because it would take too much time, or maybe because you were afraid you'd fall apart if you let it all come to the surface? I understand. Perhaps like me, you've tried to pray away the pain, only to realize that healing's a process, but you're not sure you want to go through it. Although we can't go back and change circumstances or relationships that have wounded us, God does want us to go back and process our pain with Him so that He can heal our hurts and give us hope. When we don't deal with pain from our yesterdays, they can actually creep into our todays and keep us from experiencing all that God has for our tomorrows. This happened to me in my relationship with my husband several years into our marriage. I don't know exactly when it started. I just remember becoming really resentful and critical towards JJ. During that time, I started begging God to show me what was going on, and over time, He did. He started to remind me of hurts and disappointments from my childhood that I hadn't dealt with or healed from. You see, my parents divorced when I was really young, and it left me feeling broken and sad. Yet I'd never grieved the happily ever after I longed for but didn't have. And all those unfulfilled hopes led to bitter expectations. I wanted JJ to make up for what my dad had never been as a father to me or as a husband to my mom. So I tried to create my own version of a happily ever after by being controlling and critical. But my strategy was not working. One afternoon, I remember reading God's promise in Jeremiah 29:11, where it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Then I kept on reading this time, and I discovered that there's a premise that follows that promise. After God declares He knows the plans He has for us, He says, "Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart, and I will lead you out of captivity." I realized then that I was in captivity to the hurts and fears of my past, and they were keeping me from God's plans for hope in my future. Although it wasn't easy, I decided to ask the Holy Spirit to remind me of other experiences and relationships that had wounded me and what effects they'd had on me, how far from God they'd taken me, and how they'd hurt me and others. You know, this morning I was thinking back to what God did in my marriage over 10 years ago. And God brought to mind my little girl. Her name is Aster, and we adopted her from Ethiopia a couple years ago. And lately, Aster's been struggling with a lot of fears and a lot of anxiety, especially when it comes to being away from me. And it's because of what she's been through. She's experienced abandonment, and all of those things are coming to the surface. But Aster doesn't know what's causing them. Yet I do, because I know her heart, and I know her story. And I know that one day she's going to need to process those things with God, but also with me, because I know her. Maybe as you listen to some of my story and even some of Aster's story, things from your past and memories are beginning to surface, and you're wondering, what are some of those things that you need to process with God? Or there are things in the past that are holding you back from His plans for your future. You know, it's a process, and it takes a lot of time, it takes prayer, it takes courage, and yes, it'll take some tears. But as I look back at what God did in my marriage, it was so worth it. You see, over time, I was able to let go of the pain from my past and take hold of hope and healing. I was also able to accept JJ for who he was and trust God to make him the husband that God knew I needed. You know, when we allow Jesus to search our hearts and bring His perspective into our pain, redemption comes. Whether it's the pain from our yesterdays or hurts from our todays, when we give Jesus time to pour His truth into our wounds, His love flows into our pain and makes us whole again. In chapter 4, I talk about us creating a timeline to help us identify key events that have caused painful emotions and memories. Then we can ask God to reveal how our past has affected us, our relationship with Him, and other people. And we can invite Jesus to walk with us through the process of replacing our pain with the healing balm of His love, grace, and truth. On page 81, I share this. As we process the pain of our yesterdays, learn through the disappointments of our todays, and face some fears in our tomorrows, doubt will still creep up and threaten to steal our hope. But each time that happens, we can stop and seek God's perspective in that place. We can ask Him to show us His purpose by revealing what is true about who we are and what we've been through that caused us to start doubting ourselves. Then we can ask God to help us redefine our future, not through the filter of our past and our pain, but through the power of His life-giving promises. And do you know what happens when we do that? Moment by moment, day by day, doubt by doubt, God tells us in Jeremiah 29:14, I will be found by you. We find Him again and again. We find the one who longs to lead us out of the captivity of our doubts and into a place of freedom and hope. You know, God's love is not only unfailing, it redeems and restores. His truth cuts to the core of our struggles, bringing purpose to our pain, redemption from our past, and hope for our future.